The oppression and inequality of women by the current regime is deplorable. Iranian women want equality. They want respect. They want the right to participate in all social, economic, and political activities. They want to live their lives in a productive manner and with dignity, which unfortunately is not the case under the current regime in Iran. The current regime's theocratic manner of declaring women as physically, intellectually, and physically inferior to men is counter to women's rights, and it is counter to women's expectations. Fortunately, Iranian women and Iranian youth have always displayed great physical and moral courage, and they've also displayed a willingness to accept great risk, to include imprisonment or even death in the pursuit of freedom. Removing the MEK from the FTO list and allowing them to continue to bring pressure on the current regime, combined with the strength and courage of those individuals in Iran who want their freedom, and especially the women and the youth of Iran, offers the best solution, in my opinion, for seeing Iran with a government that is sensitive to the needs of the people and one that provides the opportunity for all citizens to enjoy the basic human rights that the rest of the free world enjoys. In my opinion, in the United States, we have a great Secretary of State in Secretary Hillary Clinton. But for those below her that make the recommendations that must rise to her level to take the MEK off the terrorist list, I ask, what are you waiting for? Get the recommendation in front of the Secretary and let's get on with business. I know that the prayer of all of us here today is that democracy will prevail throughout the Middle East, but in such a manner that peace and stability will be maintained. And our hope is that the MEK will be taken off the FTO list so that they can lead the effort to bring about change in Iran for the sake of the Iranian people and for the sake of the international community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Rajavi, and thanks to the Solidarity Committee for organizing this wonderful symposium in a city that testifies by its very history to the persistence of the idea of freedom. And thanks to all of you for being here, for attending this symposium. I'm sure that there's only one place where you would much rather attend a symposium, and I would much rather attend a symposium there with you, and that is in a free Tehran, and let's hope we do that soon. Many of us in this room, including me, have had occasion to make the case many times over, as recently as yesterday, that there is simply no basis in law or in fact for continuing MEK on the U.S. State Department's list of foreign terrorist organizations. And there are many reasons, including MEK's close cooperation with the United States and other free countries in exposing Iran's nuclear program, for removing MEK from that list. But events in the world have a way of overtaking even the most urgent rhetoric and even the best framed legal and policy arguments. And events in the Middle East and in North Africa have done precisely that. Authoritarian regimes have been toppled in Tunisia and Egypt, and even the brutally repressive regime of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya has been shaken. And he has managed for now to hang on to power only with the most blatantly brutal and repressive tactics. But his regime is actually fragile. He has resorted to calling his opponents terrorists, which of course is precisely what the Iranian regime has done to MEK. It has called us terrorists. But there was an important development yesterday in the world's confrontation with Gaddafi that could be of tremendous help. For the first time in recent memory, perhaps the first time ever, The United Nations Security Council has taken the position that a tyrant's repression of his population by brutal force, such as Gaddafi is doing, presents a sufficient threat to world peace to warrant intervention by the United Nations. Well, the regime in Iran is at least as brutal as Gaddafi's, if not more so. And for 3 decades, it has been more systematically repressive. And even as it is more brutal and systematically repressive, it is subtle because it understands the significance of Ashraf. In fact, yesterday, after the United Nations passed its resolution, it added more loudspeakers outside Ashraf so that now the total is 240. 240 loudspeakers blaring 24 hours a day to unnerve and harass people. The brutality that Iran has unleashed on its own people is staggering. More than 120,000 have been executed. Many more thousands have been tortured. But the world has been blocked from learning many of the details because the regime keeps a tight lid on news coming out of Iran. 2 years ago, the people of Iran took to the streets of Tehran and other cities to protest the results of a sham presidential election and to try to take advantage of a split in the regime. They were brutally put down with hundreds killed and thousands arrested. Recently, following events in Tunisia and Egypt, Iranians again took to the streets and demanded regime change, demanded the removal not simply of Ahmadinejad, but of Khamenei. In neither case did the UN act. The strongest statement by the President of the United States at that time was that the world is watching. Of course, the world has watched and sat on its hands many times in history while people were slaughtered. So to say that the world is watching is a very little comfort. And I am not such an optimist as to believe that the Russians and the Chinese would not try to use their veto to stop any strong action against Iran. But make no mistake, the resolution on Libya is a watershed. It can provide the source for a claim that the Iranian people, too, deserve international action when their people are under siege. And they are under siege now. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton expressed support for the thousands of protesters in Iran's capital and said the Obama administration supports the aspirations of the people who are in the streets. She also called attention to the hypocrisy of the Iranian regime, which praised the uprisings in Egypt and Tunisia, even as it suppressed opposition at home. But it's time for us to overcome our own hypocrisy inherent in our policy regarding MEK. And it is within Secretary Clinton's power to do just that. A court of appeals in the District of Columbia has told her to reconsider the designation of MEK. And from the history of that designation, it's clear that it was made initially in an effort to open up a dialogue with the mullahs, and that effort has been a complete failure. It's also clear from that history that MEK was kept on the list out of fear that Iran, if it was taken off, Iran would provide IEDs and other deadly devices to insurgents who are fighting and killing U.S. troops. And of course, Iran has done that even while MEK has remained on the list. The time has come to end that sad history. And it's particularly important now. This is a concrete step that the administration can take without having to obtain support from others on the Security Council. The Iranian regime has been attacking MEK through its proxies in the United States and abroad, calling MEK a terrorist organization and denouncing even those who participate in symposiums like this one. No less an organization than FARS, the Iranian press agency, has gone out of its way to attack those who speak up for changing the designation of MEK. I am, of course, proud to have been named in the FARS story, because to be criticized by FARS is a badge of honor. But I will be far prouder when Secretary Clinton does what she should do and removes the terrorist designation from MEK. Because that would be consistent not only with the policy interests of the United States, but also with the ideals of the United States. That would have the